That's all I can say about that. And don't talk to the devil in your dream. Number 3. Now, this was a true story. Now, I was, again, a teenager here, so I'm probably about 15 or 16 at this time. And all I can say is that my parents, or my father and stepmother, okay, moved into this old, creepy Victorian house that was basically, I don't know, built in the 17 or 1800s or whatever. And it was basically, the best way I can describe it is picture the Munsters house, and then a little bit more modern than the Munsters house, but not much. I used to call it the Munsters house. So it's a creepy house. And if you ever watch the Munsters, maybe you youngins, do you guys know what the Munsters are?
Yeah.
All right, good.
No, I do. I don't know what the
Well,
Munsters.
you probably know the Addams Family,
Yeah, it's
right?
like the Addams
so it's like
Family.
the Addams Family, Munsters house, creepy house, right?
Yeah,
So,
I haven't been in there, but I've seen it, and it's really creepy.
Yeah.
Huge mansion, and
Yeah.
it's just creepy.
now, there was 4 floors, so it's a big
Wow.
place. Actually, including the basement, I guess you could call it almost like 5. Between the attic and the basement is like almost like 5 levels on this thing. So this is a creep mansion. But basically, I was on the 2nd floor, and my father's room was actually adjacent to my room when this all went down. And what happened was one night,
It's a UFO.
Right
Yeah.
now, passing by.
I,
You hear it? You hear it?
I believe it's a plane. Just to debunk that one. I'm no MUFON expert, but I think it's a plane. So what happened was, it was the middle of the night, okay? I was a little, not sleeping. I used to stay up late, whatever. My father was fast asleep in the other room, and everyone was asleep. But I was kind of half in and out, sleeping a little bit, and then all of a sudden, I felt like a small tug by my feet on the blanket, like a little pull, So I was like, oh, that's weird, Then I was like, whatever, Then there's about a minute interval between these little actions. So then about a minute later, I feel another little pull, a little harder, still weak, but a little harder, pulling at just a little tug at the end of the bed, So then I started to get a little weird. I'm like, that's weird. That is getting weird, And I'm like, is this happening or not happening? So then about another minute later, I felt a slightly bigger tug, And it wasn't big, but it was enough to now I sat up in my bed. So at this point, I'm sitting up in bed, and I'm just like, really kind of freaked out, While I'm sitting up, nothing really transpires for the next 5 minutes almost, So I kind of lay back down. So now I lay back down. I'm like, keeping my eyes open now because I'm kind of looking up. I'm not really looking toward the end, but my eyes are rolled down. I'm trying to see if I can see anything. And all of a sudden, I get a fairly good tug. And the blanket moves a little bit. It moved maybe an inch off down me, maybe an inch or so, but it was an inch and a half. But it was a bigger tug, and it was like there's really something pulling me. There's no question something's pulling now. At my point, there's no question something's pulling my blanket, and I'm starting to think to myself, this thing is testing me. So obviously, if I allow it to continue to do what it's doing, it's going to keep testing me until I believe, So I thought I was, and I knew to myself, something was telling me inside, if you just discard it, tell it to go away, it'll go away, But I was almost half curious, but I was really scared. So now I'm literally scared. My heart's pumping, and I'm like, this is just something real going on, and I don't know what it is, And so then all of a sudden, again, nothing really transpired, maybe another 5 minutes, and then I just tried to convince myself, this isn't real. This isn't happening. It's just not happening. And then it happened. Well, what happened? Let me tell you what happened. So I lay back down. I'm trying to convince myself all this stuff is manifesting in my head. This ain't true. It's got to be this, that. And all of a sudden, the blankets get whipped off me about more than halfway down my body, the whole blanket gets pulled off, the whole cover. Now I'm just freaked. Now I am completely lost it. So I try to scream as hard as I can. I'm screaming for my dad. And sadly enough, I know I sound like a little wuss, but the thing is, I was like, Dad, Dad. I couldn't even get a word out. Dad. I couldn't even use my voice to scream. That's how scared I was. I was petrified because this was an undeniable creep thing in me in my room, that was really playing with me. And so finally, after about 30 to 40, I wouldn't say 30 seconds. Probably felt like 30 seconds. I bet it was more like 15 seconds. So after 15 seconds or so, I finally get my voice to project, and I'm like, Dad, Dad. And then my father, after me screaming at the top of my lungs, I finally got my voice. And my father's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Comes charging in. And then I explained to him what happened. Now, one would think that, he's my dad, he's going to calm me down, whatever else. But actually, in the moment of terror like that, and I was probably about to have a heart attack, and then I'm trying to explain to him what happened, and there's something in my room, and I'm freaking out. And my father tries to explain to me it was probably static. And I was like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I'm like, yeah, static. Because I would have clung on to anything he said at that time to believe that it was anything but what I thought it was. Crazy, like some evil thing. So then after, he calmed me down, he stayed with me for at least 15 minutes, nothing happened in those 15. We were watching the bed, and it never happened again. But it tested me until I couldn't take any more, and I believe that if I could have withstood that halfway cover off, I bet those covers would have flew across the entire room. Wow. But, it was going to test me until I was convinced, and I only made it to halfway down. But it was enough to...
That's my favorite story, except for the one that just recently happened that he's going to tell you next.
Oh, yeah.
This is literally the scariest story ever.
I call it 0.5. I mean, the others were really what I consider paranormal. This is more of what I call, a sleeping event, that I think things happen to people when they're semi-conscious. But basically, I was asleep at night
no big deal.
In bed, and it was weird because I had a literal conversation with my son, who was about 12 or 11 at the time.
Oh, this is the new story. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
The 0.5.
Yeah. Oh, this is thinking of another one. But basically, I was sleeping with my wife in the bed. Okay. And she was dead asleep like a log.
You guys, really quick, just to let you know, this actually just happened less than a year ago, right here in this house that we're in now, that we're at now. So
I'll believe your timing. It's probably
it's less than a year ago. Yeah,
less than a year. I was saying maybe a year or more.
No, a year ago.
Okay,
yep.
so and then this really happened. So my wife is dead asleep next to the bed, next to the bed where we're sleeping. And I'm kind of in and out. I'm not really sleeping well. I usually stay up a little later than her anyway. And so she doesn't know what's going on. Now I'm sitting up in bed, and I see a figure at the end of my bed. And it was a very clear figure to me. It was so clear. I mean, let me say so clear but not clear. What I mean is it was more of a silhouette. There wasn't fine detail in the face, but it was definitely my son. And I know what my son looks like, and I know what his hair looks like, and I know what his body looks like, and I know the shape of his ears and this and that. And it was definitely my son, in my opinion, at the end of my bed. And I had a literal conversation with him while my wife's asleep in bed. And I'm talking to him like, what do you want? What do you need? What are you doing here?
Get out of here.
Yeah, I don't know. And he's not responding. He's just kind of moving and just swaying and sitting there and not responding. And I start to raise my voice a lot louder, like, what are you doing? And then I think, did my wife wake up? I think she started to wake up or whatever. But basically, at that time, the figure just kind of went away and took to the side and kind of headed back towards the door outside, and it went away, and I didn't see it anymore. And I was like sitting up in bed saying, oh my God, what an idiot. I was just talking to what I thought was my son, and I just realized I'm talking to nobody. I'm talking to a damn ghost. You know what I mean? So it was freaky, because then I realized my son is actually in the next room just sleeping. He's not anywhere to be found. So it was super creepy that I actually had a literal conversation with my son, talking to him in the middle of the night, asking him what the hell he needs, and then to find out that I wasn't talking to anybody but some kind of freaky silhouette, and it was creepy because it looked just like him, and it was no mistake in my mind that it was any other being. It was all exactly in the shape of my son, and his face and his hair and this and that, but I couldn't see the details because it was dark, and it was but super, super creepy. But what I can say about that one is I kind of chalked that one more up to being, maybe I was, half awake, half asleep. I don't know what I was. My eyes were Google-eyed from being in the dark. I don't really know. But it didn't terrorize me like the other ones did. The other three were, more fairly terrorizing. So that's why I call it 3.5. This one was more of a.
It's not a whole story.
This isn't a full. I didn't nearly have a heart attack on that one. But those are my stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Right, girls?
Yes.
It's the best I could